Great. So I'm just going to share my screen. Can you all see this? Give me a nod, a thumbs up, or a yes. Perfect. So welcome everyone again to Trans Imaginations Roaming Free, Data Security, Trans Youth, and Philanthropic Research, which is a part of G4GC's virtual convening titled Reclamation and Reciprocity, Harvesting Just and Liberated Futures for Girls, Femmes, and Gender Expansive Youth of Color. In this workshop, I want us to explore trans youth of color, how they are building cyber community, and what our interaction should be with that community as researchers, as philanthropists, as young people, as interested people, or anything like that. This conversation will center 4 different TikToks. I do want to make a note that I talked to the creators of each TikTok, telling them that their TikToks could be used as part of a conversation that we have during this convening. And they all gave me their okay. Some of them gave me their thoughts or anything like that. It was a cool conversation. And then during the presentation, I ask that you know anything that comes to mind, because I'm hoping that we can have a conversation that hinges on one overarching question, which is trans youth of color are forming private cyber community. So what is our role as philanthropists, researchers, and young people to capture needed data, but also respect privacy? Before we begin, I also want to ask for you to share any feedback about this session or the broader convening via our convening survey. Find the link on the main page of Swapcard and on the follow-up emails that G4GC sends. So why did I want to have this conversation in the first place during this convening? One of my friends sent me this TikTok. I do want to note that the TikTok shows explicit language. So if you're not ready for that, please mute it real quick. I'll let you know when we're back by doing a thumbs up. What the fuck? Yo, yo. Just checking, can everyone hear that? Can someone unmute, give me a yes if you can hear it?
Yes.
Thank you, Cedra. Okay. What the fuck? God damn! What the fuck, yo? God damn! God damn! God damn! I'll show each TikTok twice because it's such a short amount of time. Only 7 seconds. It's quick to read. The TikTok reads, when you try and explain that you identify as both non-binary and a Black woman, because for you, they aren't mutually exclusive identities. When my friend sent me that TikTok, I was like, yes, exactly. This is how I feel. This is how I describe myself as well. And I felt very seen by my identities. I hold the truth that I identify as both a Black non-binary person and I am perceived and socialized as a Black woman. I walk in the histories of generations of Black women and Black non-binary people, and I respect both the joys and plights from those ancestors. When I looked at the comments, they all read, thank you so much. This is so affirming. I love this video. And some people gave their own insights over how they felt about their identities, including non-binary. I am non-binary, but society forced me to identify with the plight of the Black woman. Only way I know how to explain it. The two cannot be separated from me. People really felt seen by this TikTok as I did. And it started to highlight for me the importance of creating community and the cyber community that is created on TikTok for trans youth of color. Quickly, I came across specific ways that trans youth of color are communicating with one another about their own communities using their own data to create those insular communities. These come from 2 cyclical points. The first is the need to have an insular community, and the second is the knowledge of how to use your own data. Listen, Generation Z and Generation Alpha, which is a generation right after Generation Z, we have lived for the internet our entire lives. I had a MySpace in elementary school. My parents took that away. I had a Facebook in 4th grade. My parents took that away too. In middle school, I started my Tumblr, and then I got Instagram in 6th grade. Then Twitter and TikTok are ruling the world right now. So, hey, Indra. So these are all the different ways that I live on social media, as do a lot of my friends. And I've also created a lot of mutuals. And mutuals are friends created from mutual following that have the same interests, identities, or opinions on certain topics. Through these conversations with mutuals, we started doing identity formation and started seeing ourselves as who we are in all of our various identities, like this TikTok, being a Black non-binary person, also a Black woman at the same time. Thus, we've been creating space on the internet and reclaiming our space on the internet through stepping into our power, all in a cyber community. Trans youth are creating and protecting their data and their cyber community in 3 ways. The first is by utilizing DNIs, or do not interacts. The second is by morphing our own data through data moshing. And the third is by using algospeak, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on. So I'll start with utilizing do not interacts. I'm going to show you this TikTok about do not interacts, and these are just statements that limit involvement for users outside of target communities. I do have to note that the TikTok is 11 seconds and has a lot of text on it. Do not worry, I'm going to type the important text in the chat and also read aloud the do not interact statement. One thing I still don't understand about TikTok is how I'm supposed to read that in 11 seconds. I'm sorry. It took me like 30 tries to read that entire statement. It says, hello and welcome to Trans Youth Sanctuary. This is a safe space specifically made for transgender minors who are not out of the closet yet, / are living in an unsafe transphobic household. Here we can share experiences, tips, vents, and we can support each other, whether you're planning on transitioning socially / medically or not. We welcome you. The most important piece of this statement is the DNI, which reads, I ask that you only interact with these posts if you're looking to vent or support others or give advice. Since TikTok hinges on an algorithm, which is trying to know how you interact with certain posts. So if you like, if you comment, if you share different posts, the algorithm notes that and puts more posts like that on your main page, which is called your For You page, or FYP on TikTok. By interacting with a post like this, you're interacting with more trans youth sanctuaries. So you're able to find more TikTok content around trans youth that's creating a safe space for you. However, if you do not interact with it, as the TikTok is asking you to, if you don't fit into the target community, you're just going to pass by it and you're not going to get many TikToks around the same topic. This is an integral way that trans youth are already creating digital spaces for themselves. This community specifically is focused on making it a safe space to vent, to talk about all the plights of being a trans youth of color, but also hopefully all the joys as well. So that's the first way we're creating cyberspace. The second way is by morphing our own data to protect our cyberspace. And one way that's being done is by data moshing. Data moshing is manipulating the data of media files to achieve visual or auditory effects that limits algorithmic readings. So before I explain a little bit more about what that is, I'm going to show this TikTok. Cool. I think this TikTok is very, very cool because there are two things happening in it. First, that flag is the flag for trans people more generally. And so this trans young person of color is trying to protect themselves from their guardian knowing their identities. The young person does not yet think that their guardian should be privy to. So the TikTok reads, guardian, that flag, the one in your room, what is it supposed to mean? And then the TikTok user makes the flag disappear. and is left to say, what flag? So there's already a privacy component happening in the real life. And now in digital space, the second piece is data moshing. The data moshing is the actual disappearing of the flag. The algorithm is not privy to the creator's identity either because of this. Algorithms are able to look into videos and point out images and sounds that they recognize from Google searches and other places in the internet. By data moshing, this young person is taking that flag, is distorting the image so that the algorithm cannot read the flag as the trans flag. This is a very complex way to protect yourself from the algorithm by manipulating your data. But young trans people of color have lived on the internet and are used to their data being exploited, unprotected, and used against them. So they have reclaimed their own data and usurped how data is used. The last way that I want to talk about how trans youth are creating their own privacy and insular spaces is algospeak. Algospeak is the use of code words or turns of phrases adopted to create brand safe language that avoids posts from getting either removed or used to enter sites, otherwise known as communities, on TikTok. I'll show this TikTok next. I really love it because it's giving a shout out to West Africa and it's quite melancholy and joyous at the same time.
Jealousy, jealousy, I don't care. I don't care. I don't. Jealousy, jealousy, I don't care. Envy, I don't care. I don't. Jealousy.
I just had a great time watching that TikTok. Algospeak is used during that TikTok because this TikToker is trying to highlight the opinions that they've heard about their own identities and their own gender presentation. Things like people will think you're a girl, or plaiting your own hair, are you a woman? However, they are deciding that they don't care and they want to live in their own identities. So they're just dancing, having a good time. The TikTok features algospeak, and that reads in the caption, gender is made up. Hashtag NB, ENBY, hashtag Black NB, hashtag FYP or For You page, hashtag Black Trans Lives Matter. Algospeak is something that you have to be in the know about. There are specific terms that trans youth utilize to filter out TikTok users who may not be a part of the community. Examples of that are NB, ENBY, meaning non-binary, N as in Nancy, B as in boy as letters, meaning non-binary as well, trans, but the A is an @ meaning trans, and lastly, la $ bean or la $bean, meaning lesbian. If you do not know these words, it's hard for you to enter the communities in those spaces. However, if you do have community that is trans on TikTok, you already know about these words. So in curating my own TikTok, I can search NB and find a slew of TikToks dedicated to the community that I'm a part of, because those posts also use ENBY to mean non-binary as well. So again, we are subverting and using the algorithm to create our own community so that TikToks within our own communities are appearing on our For You page, which is again, the main page of TikTok. This need for community again comes from two cyclical points. First, the need to create an insular community to reclaim our own space. And the second, learning how to utilize your own data. Trans youth understand their data has been used and profited off of, so they want to profit off their own data to create their own private community for themselves. They do this by utilizing DNIs or do not interacts to block out unwanted users, by morphing data through data moshing to subvert the algorithm, and by using algospeak to enter and block unwanted people from the community. When thinking about how trans youth are emphasizing their own data and data privacy, and most importantly, data security, I am drawn to the way that philanthropy uses data as well. Trans youth are really trying to protect themselves, so how is philanthropy and research more generally trying to protect trans youth as well? In philanthropy, data is used to grant, understand the communities that are under-resourced, and move money to those communities. It is used to track money, to target the landscape of funding, to continue regranting to communities that are under-resourced, i.e. see where the money is moving so we can move more money. And lastly, to conduct learnings so that data and granting is done better, while also trying to understand or better understand the communities that are being funded. Philanthropy talks about research in a way that's very philanthropy centered. To talk about that more, we have another research workshop coming up in this convening. My question is, how could research look different if we are centering accountability to our grantee partners and the narratives they want to be shown? How are we honoring the data they want to give us versus they do not want to give us? How are we protecting the data that they do give us from outside sources that our grantee partners may not want to have access to their data? In sum, I am pondering, how can we move towards community-centered data policies and ethics in philanthropy? Which brings us back to the question of our discussion. Trans youth of color are forming private community spaces online. So what is our role as philanthropists, researchers, and young people to capture needed data, but also respect privacy? Here's a glossary of terms that I use throughout this talk. I'll go speak data moshing, DNI, and mutuals. I'll type this into the chat as well as the larger question around data privacy. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see each other and talk to each other and communicate in that way. Are there any thoughts, ideas, anything that is coming to mind?
Hey, everybody. I'm Whitney. My pronouns are she, her. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was funny, it was informative, it was visual, and also important. I feel like also just for transparency, like with folks on the call, I do work for G4GC. I work very closely with Solace. We are both researchers on the team. So we think about these questions a lot. So I don't want to actually say too much, but I feel like one of the baseline thoughts or practices that I want to bring into the space that I actually surprisingly feel maybe aren't as present in philanthropic practices around research are like consent practices. I think that, Solace, you brought up a really important point around how research is used in philanthropy, whether that's like to understand how funds are getting moved or maybe for reporting. And oftentimes, in my experience, there is more of like an obligatory kind of relationship between filling out or like providing research or data, and that kind of like obscures consent practices. So I feel like this question of what is our role as researchers and also respecting privacy at like a fundamental level is like a question of like, well, even what does consent look like in our research in the sector? And when we're thinking about consent, are we talking about co-thinking, co-designing those consent practices alongside trans youth of color, or with, the people who, or the communities who we're asking to like engage in research with?
Hi, my name is Nar, they, them pronouns. I am also working at G4GC. And I like that you bring up the topic of consent within research and philanthropy.
And then I'm so sorry, Nora, I'm going to ask you to repeat what you said because I completely missed it.
The gist of what I was saying was, who are the people that are doing the data in philanthropic bodies, and is there trans representation there? Is there young folks holding that? I think you, Solace, are an example of that as well. And how do we continue to build that model out and share that with other funders, with other organizations, with other youth?
Yeah, that's a really lofty question, and it relates to another question that I had. Please continue answering the main question around respecting data privacy. But there's another question around how we respect do not interact conditions as researchers, as interested people. How can we capture data without being in the know about algo speak? So how would you know to enter communities if you can specifically speak on ENBY, meaning non-binary? And the biggest question I have is, should we be in the know? Should we be in these private spaces in the first place?
Thank you, Solace, for leading the conversation. And, you know, I wasn't going to say anything, but you were like, should we be in the know? And I'm like, no, was the first thing that came to my mind, right? And so me, as somebody who is a cisgender Black woman, I should not be in the know. And then I don't know if there's a comma or a semicolon, unless I'm invited. And the only way I get invited is not asking to come in, but based on how I show up in space, people can choose to invite me or not. And I think that can be a hard place for people to sit in who want to know, especially if they're like, but I want to know because I want to do good stuff. And it's like, yeah, even with your good intentions, I think that the should you know is a no, unless comma semicolon you are invited. And I think that can be hard to hear, again, especially if your intention is on doing good work. But also if you are somebody who is committed to do the work, then you know that I just trust like that will show up, right? And it will happen, right? And I think there's a way for people to hold space for that invitation and still not like try to curry favor to like getting in, because that can be disruptive as well, and actually not have it can be one of those examples of where like good intentions go wrong.
I also want to know what Indra typed in the chat when I was kicked out by Big Brother, as Raquel said. I think just making sure we continue to question what it means to be non-extractive in our practices. That looks different for every community and individual. Also noting what Nar said, I think I won't remember these glossy of TikTok terms, totally fine. But I will remember the learnings from them, which are examples of faith-based community, faith-based care work, and protecting our peoples, which is big snaps to that. Cedra brought up a good point about not needing to be in the know, but how do you sit within that discomfort then, as someone who wants to help communities?
You
put
sit
a
like
big
you sit like
quotation.
this. You
Yeah.
you sit real uncomfortable. Like I don't even know how else to say it, but you know, yeah, you still you sit real uncomfortable, like you do a lot of hard work on your own. And if you have the opportunity to connect with other communities that are not ones that you belong to, I think it's fine to express interest, but you have to know when you're when you need to stop, right? Yeah, and you stop and continue to do your work. And again, trust that when there's a right alignment, that there's a right alignment and you can move forward from there.
Hi, my name is Devlin. I use she, her, and she plus pronouns. And I just feel like I need to talk in draft because my brain is going like, wow. So please forgive the disjointed thoughts. When I was thinking about not knowing how research is going to be used, and so having like good intentions and not being a part of a community, and then researching, and then folks using said research because they're not thinking about safety or any of those things, to then be extractive or to not actually do the things that we would want to do, you know. And just on the outside of that, I think about ACE studies. I don't know if the adverse child experiences research that then folks then use to talk about, oh, if these things happen to you, then you're going to have these problems, not considering any of the systemic problems that cause some of that. And then using it to take folks out of their homes, right? To take kids from guardians. So that's part of the thing I wonder is how to be, I don't know, we're not future tellers, but how to be thinking about those things for communities, especially safety is an issue. And then I thought about what does it look like for folks to do their own research, like to be trained, like to use what we know to then, instead of doing the research, to be the people that train the folks to actually do the research and then come with, well, this is what we need based on that research. Please help us in this part.
Sure.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say, I love the questions people are bringing up. I'm definitely with Cedra, where it's like, no, we don't have to be in the know. I do kind of want to throw a question out as, you know, someone who is a researcher in philanthropy, is like, if we're okay not being in the know, how do we like contend with like the blank spaces around research and information that sometimes may feel useful around particular communities that, you know, in this case, we're talking about like trans young people of color. And I know I can find like basically no data on who's giving to trans young people. And so, you know, I don't think that is, I want to be clear, like that is definitely a sign that the people who are doing research probably are not inclusive of trans young people, don't have trans people of color on their research team, are not doing intersectional research. So it speaks to the research values. And like, do we feel like that research is necessary? Or like, how do we move around those blank spaces that we might want filled in while also still respecting privacy, honoring it, and also like maybe when we're not invited to the party, like being okay with that?
Whitney, I think that's a really interesting thing you brought up. And what I first thought about was a new grantee partner that we are funding that I met last week. They had brought up the fact that they don't mention that they explicitly or they prioritize trans girls of color in their work because they're afraid of having sort of more ammunition being used against them in the state they're in due to state policies. And also they want to make sure that they're getting funded by other organizations too. Which I think goes back to like, what are our data policies? What is hidden in plain sight, like we see in these TikToks, for folks to be able to, if they know, and they can really amplify that work. And if they don't, at least the community we're serving is still protected. And how we do that, I don't know.
What Nara just brought up another question for me, which I will also type in the chat. Sorry, my roommates just got home. I don't know if you can hear that. I think she's okay, good. What narratives are we building around trans youth of color? How are we telling stories of young trans people using data? So what narratives have you heard? Which is an open question that usually invites a lot of non-joyous narratives, but I think that's still important to raise so that we understand how data has been used against trans youth of color, as Nara was just raising. Since it's crickets, I'm wondering, are we not hearing anything about trans youth of color, which is also a data point, just a sad data point. I'm seeing a nod from you. Yes.
So I'm feeling like, yes, the data points are very small, and there is a need for a shift in the narrative. And we will be talking about that a little bit in tomorrow morning's plenary. But the thing that kind of comes up for me is that the data is not there. The questions are not being asked. The data is being swept under the rug. Just so we can tell the story of sort of, strife of one trans kid in an area of so many people, in a way that attacks them, rather than how can we use data to tell a narrative that this is a safe space no matter where you are.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nar. And I only didn't speak because I'm keeping count of how many times I talk, so I don't overdo it during this session. And so one of the things I'm thinking about alongside that too, Nar, is like the bravery, right? And sometimes that comes as like a double-edged sword that also doesn't fully tell the narrative. So what happens when the stories are limiting, right? And don't tell the full scope of what trans youth specifically, I'm thinking about trans youth of color, don't show and don't ask the right questions, or there's data, but it's not the data that people think is, trendy or sexy or captivating enough. And so something is there, but that's not chosen to be uplifted because it doesn't match what the researcher or philanthropist perspective is of it. So that sits there until they find something that fits the perspective that they want to crank out and then fund.
We only have 2 minutes left, so I do want to hear if there are any last thoughts from anyone that they want to bring up around trans youth of color or just data more generally, data privacy, data security, research, how you're doing today, anything if you want to enter your voice into this space or continue having your voice in this space. Love your voice, Cedra.
So Liz, this is Sarah. I just wanted to share, I'm she, her, ella. Share that my mind is also going like, wow, a whole new, it is a whole new generation, a whole new world. And I don't feel that I have any kind of like, it's like I respect it so much that I probably need to stay out of it, that kind of thing. But at the same time, I just want to make sure that we're providing the right opportunities, right? Because I think one of the stereotypes we've heard economically, at least in the Latino community, economically, is that trans youth and trans, adults only have sex work to exchange. They can't find work. And so what's lovely is that here on the Navajo Nation, you see a lot of employment and you're like, oh, this is good. This is part of the solution, right? Like the right folks are getting hired and it's beautiful, but it's not so much like I think in Pico Union, in LA. Like, so it's just a reflection, but thank you so much for an amazing presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. I think that's a great note to wrap up on. So thank you all so much for coming. I'm just going to generally say check out Swapcard for more content through reclamation and reciprocity. And thank you for being here today. Bye, everyone. Have a good afternoon, morning, or evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.